Good afternoon, friends. How you doing here? November 20th. Feeling really good today. So anyways, have you ever noticed that the more left-wing an area or state is, specifically let's talk about states, the more expensive they are countrywide, with very few exceptions. Do you think that's a coincidence? No, not at all. Now, there are some exceptions. I'll explain why. For instance, I live in Illinois right now, which generally is considered a liberal state. I grew up in New Hampshire, which was at one time a very conservative state, one of the most in the country. It is no longer. New England in general, the last couple elections have gone all blue. Much more liberal in general, New England, in New Hampshire as well, than when I grew up. And I've lived in different areas, being in the military in this country, and I visited many, many areas. West Coast, Midwest, where I am now, South, North, you name it. And it's always the same. Now, there are some exceptions. Illinois, for instance, where I am right now in the Midwest, is not very expensive comparatively. It's one of the cheaper areas to live in the country compared to the West and in different areas, East, North and East Coast and stuff like that. Not Florida. Florida is pretty decent. Texas is decent. Very conservative. Tennessee, very conservative. But Illinois is not that expensive. Why? And yet New Hampshire is. Now, let's see why. Illinois, I lived two different areas of Illinois. I've lived near the Chicago area, Arlington Heights, which is very beautiful. I loved it a couple of assignments ago. And now I live right in the border of Iowa, on the Mississippi River. They call it Quad Cities. Where I used to live was quite expensive. You were heavily influenced by the city. You were a 30-minute train ride away from the city. And so it was very heavy. It was one of the northern suburbs of the city where I live. Very nice, upscale, very expensive. But over here, it's not. Okay? It's not. Most of Illinois is not expensive if you get out of the city. Why is that? If you get away from the influences of the city, I should say, the areas right around it. Because all the states around it are conservative. We're heavily influenced by Iowa here, to the point where it's almost like being in Iowa. I might actually, in a couple months or so, consider moving into Iowa. But even here, it's not expensive because Iowa, and then when you get different parts of Illinois, you're influenced by other states that are conservative, like Wisconsin. Galena, which I like very much, very heavy. Galena is in Illinois, is 3 states right there. You're in the border of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois, right where the Mississippi gets wider and meets where Dubuque, Iowa is. Very, very nice area. But the influences are so great from those other conservative states that in order for them to compete around this area with housing and different things like that, they have to keep their prices down. New Hampshire doesn't have that luxury. Okay, you say, well, I can understand the lower southern part of New Hampshire, very influenced, not too far from Boston, 45 minutes or so away from Boston, being influenced and being expensive. But why is it expensive 3 hours north in the White Mountains? Because there are no states around it that are conservative. You get Vermont, which is so damn liberal. It has gone so crazy in the last 20 so years. That was the biggest state that Harris won. She won in that state by more than any other percentage. And then you got Maine, that's liberal. And of course you got Massachusetts, which is ultra left-wing. So New Hampshire has no influence other than liberalness. So they have no incentive to take their prices down. They don't have to because everybody else is expensive. So why can't they be? Different over here. If they did that nonsense here, they would have people flocking away from the state, and they don't want that. So they have to keep their prices down. Same with New York. Okay, New York City, of course, is expensive. But the entire state is. You go a couple hours away, it's just as expensive. Why? Well, because you're influenced by Connecticut, by New Jersey. Those are all left-wing expensive states. So the whole state winds up being affected. given my point, you look around this whole country, with few exceptions, Illinois being one of them, the bulk of Illinois, because of what I just explained. When you live in a state that is run by the left, expect to pay a lot of money. That's just reality. It's Rick here. Have a great day. God bless.